Hi, fourth grade. So today we are going to be continuing with our story Tangerine. We are in the middle of November 23rd, Thanksgiving, and Paul is helping out at the Grove because of the freeze that is occurring in Tangerine County. So today we're going to be reading on the journal entry of Paul on Thanksgiving Day. And before we do that, I am going to introduce two vocabulary words to you. Our first word is the term withering. Withering is a an adjective, and it is describing a noun as damaged or some like severe. So, as we read today, I want you to think about when you hear this word withering, what noun is being described as withering? Our second word today is also an adjective, and it is the word solemn. Now, we've heard this term before in some other readings, but just to refresh your memory, solemn is an adjective and it is describing something as being gloomy. So, again, as we listen to the story today, I want you to think about what is being described as solemn. So, without any further ado, we're going to continue on. Remember, Paul was talking to his mother on the phone, telling her that he is not going to be home this evening. So, here we go. Listen up.
Then she changed gears and answered conversationally, "Your father bought a case of those fake logs. He's going to get the fireplace going, and we're going to break out the Christmas music." Uh-huh. We'll probably make hot chocolate too. Too bad you're gonna miss it. Yeah. Now what is this thing, Paul? A sleepover party? Why didn't we have any notice about it? I wasn't invited until today. I half covered the mouthpiece and whispered, "I don't know. Maybe I was an afterthought." "You don't have a change of clothes? You don't have a toothbrush?" "I'll use my finger." There was a long pause, then a long sigh. "Paul, I trust people. I trust them until I have a reason not to. Do you understand me?" "I understand." There was another long pause and some mumbling. "Your father says you have to be back here by 9 tomorrow morning. It's Eric's last game." "Okay, you can pick me up at 8 if you like." "I hope I can find that place." "Look for the sign that says Thomas Drew's Groves." The door at the far end of the hut burst open. Victor, dressed in black sneakers, pants, and hood like a cat burglar, walked in, followed by his boys. I said, "I have to go now, Mom. Enjoy your fireplace and all." She didn't say anything else, so I cradled the phone. Victor, Hernando, and Mano went right to a stack of shovels that were piled up next to the baby trees. Tino said to Henry, "You should have been here last night. We must have hauled a ton of dirt from the old grove to the Golden Dawns." He pointed to the stack and said, "Grab a shovel." Then he held up his Kmart bag. "Check it out." Tino dumped out a pile of thick black work gloves onto the desk. Everybody grabbed a pair and pulled them on. Tino was smiling. "I bought 20 pairs of these gloves. For you boys with delicate hands." Victor said. "Yeah? I'll mess up your face with some delicate hands." Tino said, "My daddy and my Uncle Charlie are out in front of the Cleopatra Grove starting a fire. They're going to call us out to haul tires and brush. Lewis is going to stay in the new grove and run the pumps. He's going to call us to chop off a lot of the ice." He smiled at Victor. "In our spare time, we're going to do what we did last night. We're going to keep the Golden Dawns packed with dirt." Then Tino extended one gloved hand toward us and held it there, just like Victor did before each soccer game. We crowded in and put our hands on top of his. He said, "You know what's up. Time and temperature. Lewis says it's got to be 10 hours of hard freeze tonight. Trees are going to die no matter what we do. We got to save what we can." Victor said very calmly, "Let's do it." And the circle broke up. We filed out with our shovels into the cold sting of the wind. The sun was dropping in the sky. The temperature was dropping too. We headed into the old grove of trees, now bare of fruit, the grove of the Cleopatra tangerines. Their leaves seemed to be withering, shriveling. We walked through the sights and smells of last night's battle to a high point of land. Tino gestured in a slow circle. Check this out. The trees in this spot were tall, weathered, and cracked. Haunted house trees. Lewis says these use these to keep the fresh brush fire going. Daddy and Tio Carlos will do the chopping and we'll do the hauling. Tino nodded at Henry D. These trees are all dead. We call them the lightning trees. They're at the highest point in the grove, so they get zapped by lightning. They've been dead for years. We don't chop them down, though, 'cause they act like lightning rods. I hope we'll get away with just chopping down one or two for the fire tonight. Tino started downhill, and we followed. Henry pointed out a line of metal contraptions that were about 4 feet high. Each had a wide, round base and a narrow stovepipe sticking up from it. Those are the smudge pots. We'll wait till you see them when they're burning. Fire comes shooting out of the tops of them, he called out. Tino, you gonna be hauling the diesel for these smudge pots? Ain't nobody else gonna do it. Tino turned at the end of the row and stopped. He pointed out a skinny 3-sided wooden box, about 5 feet tall. Henry and I looked inside. It was a glass thermometer, attached to a white metal plate that had Pepsi written across it. The temperature read 35 degrees. You'll see these at different spots, high spots and low spots inside the groves. I call Lewis with the temperature, and he calculates what we have to do and how much time we have to do it in. Time and temperature. As we approached the lowest point of the grove, the trees began to look scorched. They smelled like smoke and rubber. We reached a clearing that had obviously been the site of a fire the night before. Thomas Cruz and his brother were placing dead branches in a crisscross pattern, laying the foundation for tonight's fire. A revolting smell of burnt rubber seeped in through the debris. Tino poked his uncle as we passed by. "Que pasa, Tio?" "Two saves," he replied. Two saves, I guess that is. We emerged from the old grove into the wide, square field of the Golden Dawn tangerines. How different this field looked now. Tino and his crew had dumped 1,000 small mounds of dirt in here. Like 1,000 giant anthills, they covered up all those black irrigation hoses. Each little tree was now packed with dirt about a foot high, with a few green leaves sticking out across the top. Tino spoke again to Henry. "We have to make sure that these trees are packed above the bud onion, right here." He pointed to a spot halfway up one of the dirt mounds. "If we don't, the Golden Dawns are dead, and we got ourselves 1,000 rough lemon trees." He paused for emphasis. "That can't happen." We continued along the back of the square field until we entered the new grove. There were twice as many tall, skinny sprinklers as last time. In the distance, I could see that one part of the grove had already been watered by them from high above. We walked toward the sound of a diesel pump until we came to a rickety, corrugated iron shed, kind of a lean-to, that was open on one side. Lewis was inside it, looking at the dials on a pump and making notes. We formed a group around him, and he said, "Tonight's the night, homeboys. All over this town, all over this part of the state, people are going to get hurt by this freeze. It's a killer. It's going to kill right down to the wood, right down to the ground." He looked up at us. Actually, he looked up at me. He said, "You understand the plan, right? We're icing the new grove. We're packing the Golden Dawns, and we're burning the old grove. What's alive in the morning is what's alive in the morning." He pointed at Victor. "Did you guys get some rest?" "Yeah, we crashed all day. You ready for another night of this?" "Sure. We know we're always ready to rumble." "Yeah, I know that. Just be careful, all of you." Lewis looked to the west, so we all turned to look with him. The sun was sinking low. The Cleopatra trees stood black in the orange light, like Halloween cutouts. The temperature was dropping by the minute, and the wind was whipping up. I thought about my phone call to Mom. On Lake Windsor Downs, the people were inside, welcoming the freeze with hot cocoa and fake logs and Christmas CDs. In Tangerine, the people were heading out to fight it with shovels and axes and burning tires. That turned out to be our last moment of peace. For the next 12 hours, we waged a fierce and increasingly desperate battle to save the Cruz family's trees. We began with the smudge pots in the old grove. 100 smudge pots had to be filled with fuel, fired up, and kept burning all night. We set out in pairs to do it. Henry and I were given 2 gas cans and a lighter, and we soon figured out what to do with them. The smudge pots were hellish machines, belching foul-smelling smoke and shooting a dangerous wild flame out the top like upside-down rockets. We made hundreds of trips to the big orange diesel tank. Diesel generators pumped the water, and Lewis spread out over the new grove. That Lewis spread over the new grove. Diesel generators lit the new grove and the Golden Dawn field. Whenever we weren't responding to a crisis, we were hauling diesel. But there was one crisis right after another. A crisis might begin with a call from Thomas that the brush fire was going out. We'd take off on a run through the Cleopatra Grove, choking on the smoke, tripping in the dark. Thomas would be there, hacking part of a lightning tree, and we'd drag the dead limbs to the bonfire. Then we'd run back to the diesel tank. Soon, Lewis would call, and we'd take off for the new grove. We'd use our shovels to scrape at trees that were already getting too heavily coated with ice, trees that were about to crack. On and on it went like that, repacking dirt, hauling tires. We battled against the ever-dropping temperature. 30 degrees, 28 degrees, 26 degrees. But we were losing. The fire in the old grove was blazing high and wild, scorching the leaves off anything near it. By midnight, we had chopped down 4 lightning trees. The ice was forming too rapidly in the new grove. The coatings on the trees were too thick. The loud cracking sound of the trees splitting off branches like amputated limbs, or splitting in two like they'd been poleaxed, hung horribly in the frozen night air. We were losing. For all our frantic efforts, the temperatures continued to drop. It must have been about 2 o'clock when I saw Tino and Victor standing in front of one of those Pepsi thermometers. Victor was screaming at it. 24 degrees! 24 degrees! It was like his frozen breath was spelling out the awful words. Tino got off the walkie-talkie with Lewis and announced, "Lewis says this. If it stays 24 degrees for 10 more minutes, then it's all over. He's calling it off. We're all going home." I stopped at my place in a row of Golden Dawns, and I set down my can of diesel. One by one, I pried my black-gloved fingers back, trying to straighten out my warped hand. For the first time that night, I felt the cold, and I felt exhaustion. I dropped to my knees on that frozen piece of earth, weary to the core of my body. I looked over to my left. The new grove was glistening like an angel on a Christmas tree, lit from within by the light of the diesel generator. Every tree dripped frozen icicles from the top down to the ground, and the glow of all of them together was more beautiful than anything I'd ever seen. To my right, the smudge pots that bloated bonfire were spewing out over everything, every living thing. I saw Thomas and his brother emerge from the black and billowing smoke, marching toward Tino. I turned back and saw that Lewis was coming down too. They all met at the thermometer and talked for 5 minutes. Finally, Thomas and his brother broke away and marched back into the scorched grove. Lewis said one more thing to Tino and then went back to his duties. I got back up on my feet as Tino called us to him. He announced, "Our daddy and Tio Carlos are going to keep trying. Lewis says the rest of us have to go inside. Right now. He'll call me when we can come back out." We all trudged obediently over to the Quonset hut. I walked inside, felt the blessed heat, and collapsed on the floor. Victor picked me up into a sitting position. Then Teresa appeared in front of me with a cup of coffee. She said, "You like cream and sugar?" I shook my head dumbly and said, "I don't know." She smiled. "Let's find out." I tried to take the cup from her, but my fingers wouldn't close around the handle. Teresa stooped down, held the cup up to my mouth, and I took a sip. It made me shiver. I took another one, and then another. Finally, I was able to hold the cup in my hands. Tino said, "Fisherman, last time you were here, you collapsed because it was too hot. Now you're collapsing because it's too cold. What's up with you?" I couldn't even think of a reply, much less make one. I sat there in kind of a coma for a long, long time. Finally, Tino's walkie-talkie crackled to life. I heard him say, "All right, that's what we're waiting to hear." He turned to Victor. Lewis says the new grove is holding steady at 29 degrees, and the high spots in the old grove are showing 28. He says that the worst is over. The temperatures are going back up. Victor and Tino clasped hands, but Victor was solemn. How much dead wood you got out there? I don't know, man. Anything in those low spots has had it. He turned to include me. It got too cold down there for too long. But hey, we're still in business. Tino, Victor, and the boys got up to go back out, so I struggled to get to my feet. Tino turned to Teresa. No way he's going back outside. Orders from Lewis. Teresa pointed a stern finger at me. You heard that. Now don't move from here. I'm going to get you some blankets. I could barely move. I could barely speak. But Lewis suddenly entered, and I knew I had to. He said, Bob, you all right? I looked up at him and tried to focus my eyes. I stared hard at his left temple. There it was. I could see it in this light. It was a dark red bruise, deep set, like a birthmark. It curved over his eyebrow like a dark crescent moon. I whispered, Yeah. Tino said you were in bad shape. I was a little frozen. I'm okay now. You want to go to the hospital? No way, no. I'm feeling better already. He studied me doubtfully. I blurted out, Listen, Lewis, we only have a couple minutes, and I have to tell you something. I saw you at Lake Windsor High School. I saw what you did. Lewis straightened up. I saw you face down Eric and those other guys, and I saw Arthur Bauer hit you with a blackjack. His hand moved automatically up to his temple. Is that what it was? Yes. And you have to believe me, Lewis. They're dangerous. They're very dangerous. Lewis, to my amazement, smiled. He was about to reply when the door to the far end opened and Teresa returned. He just said, I'll talk to you about this later. Teresa came up and handed me 2 thick green blankets and a white pillow. Lewis went back out, and I crashed. The next thing I knew, it was 6:30, and the crew was coming back in. Henry D. said to me, Sun's coming up. We made it through the night. I pulled off the blankets and stood up, humiliated. But Tino came right up to me and said, Hey, fisherman, thanks for helping us out tonight. He held out his hand and I shook it. I said, Tino, I'm really sorry about what happened. What? Hey, man, you're not used to this kind of work. No, not that. I mean at my house. Tino shook his head. Oh, that. Well, we never should have gone over there. Yes, you should. You should go over there. You're my friends, or I want you to be my friends. You're welcome at my house. Tino nodded and then said, You can be our friend over here, all right? I shrugged and nodded. He added, Our daddy's driving to the takeout for some Egg McMuffins. You down with that? Yeah. Okay. Oh, and Lewis says he wants you to see you outside. All right. I went back out and found Lewis kneeling by a golden dawn tree with his face buried in the green leaves. I said, Can you smell anything now? He laughed. Yes, I can. He sat back and looked at me. I can smell what it will be like. So the golden dawn survived? Oh yeah, they all survived. They were the safest ones. When you're little like this, we can just cover up with dirt and you'll be okay. He checked behind me and said, I want to finish our conversation because I want you to know it's going to happen. Okay. You know those 2 black dudes who were there? One of them is Chandra's brother. Yeah, Antoine Thomas. Right, well, Antoine and the other dude, the muscle man, don't care too much for Eric Fisher or his friend. I said, Arthur Bauer. Right. They told me to come back on Monday and we'd take care of business. They said that all the players have to be there on Monday to turn their equipment in. Is that right? I don't know. That sounds right. I'm just telling you this so you'll know. You seem kind of scared of Eric and Arthur Bauer. Yeah, I am. Who wouldn't be? Lewis answered simply. I wouldn't be. They're punks. He pointed one rope-like finger at me. And you shouldn't be either. You watch what happens on Monday. If Antoine keeps his word, 2 punks are going to have new attitudes right around 3 o'clock. Lewis's uncle walked up and started talking to him, so I drifted back inside, thinking about my fear of Eric. How could I be so totally afraid? and Louis be not the slightest bit afraid of the exact same thing. Which one of us saw it wrong? Teresa brought out a 9-inch portable TV, and we all gathered around it to eat our Egg McMuffins. The news people said that the cold front was now moving out of our area, but it had left a lot of damage behind, and it had put some area growers out of business. They showed pictures of the grove that had been iced over. It was now dripping in the sun. Everyone in the hut watched in silence. After the news, Victor and his boys headed for home. I stood outside and waited for Mom. She pulled up right at 8 o'clock. Her first words were, "Did you stay up all night?" "No, I slept." "Paul, you look awful." "I slept, Mom, but I think I'm coming down with a cold." Mom reached over and put the back of her hand against my forehead. "Yeah, you and half the population of Lake Windsor Downs," she sighed. "Well, I'm not going to have you sitting in a freezing cold football stadium. You need rest." "You're right. I'd be better off at home." Mom thought for a minute and added, "Your father isn't going to like this." "I know. Just tell him I need my sleep." Mom sighed again. "I will, but you had better sleep." "I will." "And I will, just like the rest of the crew. But first, I had to write all this down."
Okay, boys and girls, that is where we are ending our story today with Paul. And it seems as if they were able to save the Golden Dawns. So I hope you enjoyed that reading. I hope you were all able to follow along. And today you are going to do your 2 super sentences on withering and solemn. And you are also going to have a written response today. In the reading, Tino said something to Paul. What does Tino mean when he says that Paul can be their friend over here? What does that say about the difference between the 2 families, Tino's family and Paul's family? So Tino's saying, you know, man, when you're here in our neck of the woods, yeah, we can be friends. But over where you live, doesn't sound like it's going to happen. So today you're going to tell me why you think that is. All right, see you tomorrow for some more shared reading.